Hi, Hunter Hastings here. On the Value Creators podcast, we often talk about entrepreneurs and CEOs who are making a big difference in the world through entrepreneurship. But entrepreneurship also applies when you're working in a corporation at some middle management level or some other level in the organization. Is it possible to make a difference, to change the world, to provide leadership in that kind of a role? The answer is, it's damn right, if you take the entrepreneurial orientation.
This is the Value Creators podcast. Value creation is the sole purpose of any business and every business, and for all of us as entrepreneurs. Listen to great value creators as they share their successes, trials, and lessons learned. Join us as we explore how to think as value creators, how to act as value creators, and how to view business through the lens of value creation.
Our guest today is Maisie Ganzler. She joined Bon Appétit Management Company when it was pretty small. It was about $94 million in revenues. And she started as a marketing manager. She's now Chief Strategy and Chief Brand Officer. But she had a vision about food sustainability. She developed that vision. She was determined, she was pragmatic, she was creative, and eventually she found her leverage point. And she built a sustainability system within the food industry that benefits everybody, from the consumer back to the farmer, and everybody in between. She's a great example of what can be done. She's just written a book. It's called You Can't Market Manure at Lunchtime, and we'll find out about that from Maisie. Maisie, welcome to the Value Creators podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
You have a way with words, and you've titled your most recent book, You Can't Market Manure at Lunchtime, which certainly commands attention. The book's about sustainability, primarily in the food industry, although you go into some other areas. It's how to think about it. It's how to set it as a purpose, how important it is, how to make it a brand strength, how to market it, how to communicate it. So it's the business of sustainability in many ways. So that we're excited to learn from that because you've been doing it for a long time and you're an expert. So let's start out by defining sustainability as you look at it, Maisie. In fact, in your book at the beginning, you say, hey, there's a lot of definitions of sustainability, and that's a bit of an issue. So let's start there.
Right. Well, sustainability is often defined in a very vague, lofty, sometimes poetic way. There's two definitions that I hear most often. One is based on the UN definition, which is about thinking about how what you do affects the future, what actions today have impacts tomorrow. Or one from the Iroquois Confederacy Papers, which is about how your actions today impact 7 generations from now. And those are really great ways to begin to think about the importance of our impacts, but they're really hard to run a business against. They're hard to take a purchasing decision and run it through that filter. So at Bon Appetit Management Company, as you said, we were in the food business, a food service management company. And so we created a definition of sustainability that's very specific to food. For us, that is flavorful food that's healthy and economically viable for all, produced through practices that respect farmers, workers, and the animals, nourish the community, and replenish our shared natural resources for future generations. It's a lot of words, but we really wanted to get in there the things that we cared about the most. So it's about health, economy, and farmers, farm workers, animals, and community. That becomes something very specific that as a business you can run initiatives through. And so I suggest that no matter what industry you're in, you go through that same exercise of really defining the specific issues that are important to your company and your industry.
Yeah, I noticed the word flavor is in there, Maisie, and that's a short-term benefit for customers, a good one. That's the consumer part of it, right? The first step, if you like, is flavor, and which is something we want, something we need, something we enjoy.
Absolutely. When you're selling a product, you have to first think about the immediate benefit to your customer. And if you're selling food, it's got to be flavor. If you've got a product that is sustainable but doesn't taste good, you're not going to sell it. Therefore, it is not sustainable. I always say healthy food is only healthy if somebody eats it. So you really need to have the consumption of your product to get the desired outcome.
Yeah, it's very clever balance, the immediacy of flavor with 7 generations of future benefits. And then what you've done with Bon Appetit Company, and you talk about generally in the book, is you make it a mission. And a mission is about doing things. It's not, as you say, poetic and vague. It's important, actionable stuff. So speak to us about missions a little bit.
At Bon Appetit, our CEO and founder, Fidel Baccio, even went further, and he not only created a mission, he created a dream. And he did that so that there would be a emotional connection to that mission. A dream conjures up something different than just a mission. So at Bon Appetit, our dream was to be the premier on-site restaurant company known for its culinary expertise and corporate social responsibility. So it was right there in, it's common now to say what's in the DNA of your company. Sustainability was in the DNA of our company. And as I looked in writing the book at companies that did similar things, but were known in slightly different ways, looking at, for example, Chipotle versus Qdoba, both taco chains that were started about a year apart, both out of Denver. And Chipotle has sustainability in their mission, and I think that's reflected in the brand. Where Qdoba, it's a bullet point amongst many things that they commit to. So I think if you really want your brand to be built around sustainability, you need to have it fundamentally at the heart, which is your mission.
You also use another word in the book, which you see written about a lot in the business literature, Maisie, which is purpose, which I think is slightly different from mission. I like your word dream. That's maybe better. But purpose is about a reason for being, why we exist, why we do what we do. And one of the things you say, purpose becomes the heart of the brand. It becomes the thing that everybody rallies around in the company. So are purpose and dream the same thing, or is purpose another nuance there? Tell us about purpose.
I think that the difference between those terms matters differently at different companies and to different founders or CEOs. And what's most important is that you pick the word and the structure that works best for you. I interviewed Dr. Lisa Dyson, who's the founder and CEO of Air Protein. And for her, that's really around the big, hairy, audacious goal from Jim Collins' famous book. So whether you have a mission, a dream, a purpose, or a big, hairy, audacious goal, the most important piece is that you know where you're going and that you can communicate that to your team and to your customers. The actual terminology you use, I think, doesn't matter as much.
Yeah, I like that. I like that thought, and it's business. As you said, if the food can't be sustainable if nobody eats it, and then that's the business of the company, and the company makes a profit. So there's a business aspect to this too. You've made Bon Appetit Management Company a standard in the industry. Tell us a little bit about that, and there's a good opportunity there maybe to ask you about your personal background, how you got to the position you're in with Bon Appetit. But tell us about the business side of it, how you've developed that over the years.
Well, Bon Appetit Management Company is an interesting case because it's a B2B brand. It provides food services to corporations, private colleges and universities, and specialty venues. And when customers go into one of the cafes, there's nothing that says Bon Appetit. There's no sign. It becomes the food service brand of the client. So if you're going into Chase Center, the home of the Golden State Warriors, everything says Chase Center. Nothing says Bon Appetit. So how do you, as a business person, create a differentiation and a brand when you don't have a name or a logo, anything like that? And that comes back to that idea of creating an emotional attachment and creating a differentiation. And we took sustainability as our differentiation, that we could create a different experience, a different culinary experience for guests through the taste of the food, through the health of that they were going to garner from eating the food, and as we were selling again business to business to our clients who are making the food service buying decision, that it would reflect well on their company or their school if they brought Bon Appetit in, because we were sourcing from the community and because of all of the great care that we took. So we really had to develop the differentiation through the product, not through traditional branding in terms of logo, color, that sort of thing.
So tell us how you think about customers, Maisie, because you've talked about the Golden State Warriors and the college campuses and so on. They're your customer. But when we talk about flavorful food, that's the end user. How do you think about customers? Who is your customer? Do you have both? Are they both customers? How do you deal with that?
Yeah. If you're a B2B brand like Bon Appetit, we have two customers. We have the food service buying decision maker. That could be a facilities manager, it could be an HR person, it could be a director of student services. And then we have the guest, the ultimate customer who's eating the food. We've got those dual markets to always watch out for. And I think that what has worked well for us, and I would urge others to do, is to stay ahead of both of those customers. If you want to take a leadership position, you can't wait for customer demand, for customer interest. You have to take a bet on where directionally you think customers are going. When we started down our path towards talking publicly about sustainability, our own regional vice president said, our customers are never going to care about this. Maybe some colleges will care about sustainability, some do-gooders, but corporate America is never going to care about this. Fast forward, every single request for proposal we get now has a large component of sustainability. Every corporation has made a net zero commitment and they need to measure their impacts. Bon Appetit taking that risk of being first, being out ahead of customers before anybody asked, has paid off tenfold, 100-fold. I can't even measure it. So when I think about customers, you want to make them happy, but you also want to lead them.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And let's drill down on a couple of aspects of that. You said they're happy, they care. Those are what we always call in our academic terminology subjective values, right? It's not about dollars and cents, it's subjective. So can you just go a little deeper for that for me? How does a Golden State Warriors feel about what you do for them and what you've been able to help them achieve? Are they proud? Are they feel like they're doing something good, or is it just good business? How do they feel?
I think the Golden State Warriors feel good, and it's also a business imperative for them. They built a new stadium in a new city, and something that was very important to them was to be additive to the community, not just extractive. So they have a program that we help them develop called Tastemakers, where small local artisan businesses get to have stands in the ballpark for 2 years, really boost their business from an absolute perspective of sales, but also maybe even more importantly, from a raising their profile perspectives, getting to see so many guests come through as will come through a Warriors game. So it's both a nice feeling, but also really about good business. And that's where the title of the book comes from. You can't market manure at lunchtime. It refers to a specific story around literal manure, but figuratively, it's about the dual purpose of making meaningful change, in this case, environmental change through better manure management, but marketing it, getting market credit for it. So I really think that you can do both, and that's what I hope that this book helps people to accomplish.
Yeah, and you're creating two brands, aren't you? You're creating the Bon Appetit brand and you're creating the Golden State Warriors brand, that they have a meaningful purpose themselves. They're part of their community. They're cutting edge, all of those kinds of things about their brand. So,
right. And think about how valuable that makes us as a partner. If we have helped our client bolster their brand, it's very hard for them to get rid of us, right? We become an integral part of their community building, of their goodwill, of what they have promised to their customers. It makes you invaluable.
yeah, it's good business. So we've introduced economics here, Maisie, and One of the things economists talk about all the time is trade-offs. You call it picking your battles, I think, or choosing your battles. So that's the fact that you can't do everything that you want. Circumstances often doesn't let you do some things. You'd spread yourself too thin anyway if you did everything you wanted. What are your most challenging trade-offs, and how do you pick them?
Well, I think that there's several ways to look at the trade-offs of sustainability. What the easy thing to do is go through and cherry pick all of the cost saving initiatives, right? Like food waste is both a environmental issue, but also a waste of money if you're throwing away food. So it's easy to concentrate on food waste and then take that savings and pocket figuratively. What I did at Bon Appetit was try to do my own little offset program of, if I could save money on food waste, could I spend that money on higher quality beef, for example? So trying to keep our sustainability initiatives at an even playing field, but not necessarily in cost savings. And the argument that we made about that, and what our CEO strongly believed in, is that if we had better food, and you can define better in your product in many ways, in our way, it was better tasting as well as better impacts, then people will buy your product more often. So it drives revenue. And Fidel Bauchio, who I interviewed for the book and was our CEO, always said, you can't cut costs to success. You need to drive the top line. And so getting people to come more often and to spend more money are ways of generating more revenue. And sustainability, if done well, hits those two aims.
Yeah, it's brilliant. So better quality and better sustainability is better revenue driving.
Now, there is room in any marketplace for being the low cost leader, being the value player. That is not what I would suggest if you want to create a brand based on sustainability. You may not be the most expensive, but you certainly won't be the least expensive. That shouldn't be your market niche.
Yeah, and that's our whole point about value, that value is not just low price or the price benefit analysis. It's got a lot more components to it, as you say. So you take that a little bit further in your advice to others who might be in the food industry and thinking about a sustainable brand, and you say, don't fight too many battles. Tend to think about standing for one thing, not everything. So is that right? Are you going to pick one thing or one narrow set? What's your advice?
Well, you need to pick one narrative, and that narrative may be about a single issue, such as animal welfare or around climate change, and then everything you do should support that narrative. Or it may be around being generally sustainable. That's a harder story to tell, but you should always have the story in mind. Again, we're not just talking about doing good in the world, although we absolutely want to do that. We're talking about getting market credit for it. And to get market credit, your customer has to understand it. I got to sit in with a CPG company, asked me to come in and take a look at their sustainability platform. And they were doing all sorts of cool things. They were transporting their product by rail. They were planting pollinator gardens. They had products that were organic certified. They had products that were Rainforest Alliance certified. And I had this dual reaction of, oh my God, you're doing so many great things. I was truly impressed. And then secondarily, oh my God, you're doing so many great things. It was mind boggling. And I was a customer of the product who cares about these things, and I hadn't noticed. It was confusing on the package. There was no through line. And so it wasn't to say necessarily do fewer things, but maybe talk about fewer things. And in some cases, you may need to do fewer things in order to focus your efforts and be most impactful.
So that's a good correction, I think, a single narrative as opposed to a single action. But you also say you got to get your story straight. These are complicated stories, as you say. And I think getting your story straight was it's discipline, it's practice, it's testing it on audiences. How do we get our stories straight?
Well, when you're talking about sustainability, you're talking about a lot of science and complex ideas and hard to say words. And so the first part of getting your story straight is actually just practicing saying your story and making sure that everybody in your organization understands the science behind it and isn't misspeaking. I was recently at a restaurant that is a farm to table restaurant, charging a higher price, talking about their culinary skill. And the server, when he put down the chicken dish, we all kind of went, wow, because it was really big. It was a large portion. And he said, that's actually one breast and it comes naturally. It's not from chicken that's pumped up with hormones. And I thought to myself, the FDA doesn't actually allow the use of hormones in chicken production. So no chicken is pumped up with hormones in the US. Now, antibiotics are used in chicken production, but they also actually don't affect breast size. It's about chicken genetics. And the moment that he said hormones, my ears turned off. I stopped listening to him. I started thinking about what he was saying wrong, and I didn't believe anything else he said the rest of the day or the meal. He didn't have his story straight. So it's really getting everybody, including those frontline employees who are talking to your customer every day, to understand the science behind your commitments and exactly what you are and are not committing to.
Right. The marketing is communication. It's as you say, it's not necessarily brands and logos and advertising and so on like that, but it's doing first, right? You gotta walk the walk before you talk the talk. You gotta actually do what you're promising to do, right? You can't have a narrative without the action.
Absolutely. First should come operations and then should come marketing. So you already have made changes in your supply chain, in your practices, and then you tell the story. Don't let the story get ahead of the actions.
Which takes us to your other point. You've mentioned the dream, and one of the lines in your book is dreams are hard to operationalize. So that's hard work, right? That's building systems.
Absolutely. And the things that can derail you from operationalizing your dream are the least sexy little details that nobody wants to talk about, like your software that you use for tracking purchases. One of the things that I've run into is having a limited number of fields in the software. So if you want to track, let's say, if a product is organic and if it's local, and if it's raised without antibiotics, you need 3 fields to mark that data. This is not cool, fun, mind-blowing technology. This is just the number of fields that you have in your tracking system. You need to have all of those systems set up for operationalizing sustainability.
There's an organizational component to it as well. I noticed that you invented this new position for supporting the sourcing locally idea, which was you called it the Forager, somebody who actually goes out and makes the relationships, does the checks, helps them to ship, all of those kinds of things. So you got to organize for sustainability, right?
One of the things that we found that our competitors were doing was using the complexity of purchasing systems as an excuse to not use local vendors. So they would say, local vendors don't have enough insurance, or local vendors don't know how to do the onboarding into our purchasing systems. And that was a barrier they put up. And so we did the opposite and said, we're going to actually have a person whose job it is to help local vendors through the onboarding system. And we're going to create a separate onboarding system for small vendors. And we're going to have a person that actually fills the paperwork out with the farmer versus sending a bunch of spreadsheets and saying, we expect a digital upload. So that was the Forager position, to be supportive of our vendors coming in.
Yeah, and it's kind of a relationship, right? It's a deeper relationship than a procurement relationship. You're coaching them, you're helping them, you're understanding which parts are difficult for them and getting them through that. So it's really a strong relationship kind of concept.
A true partnership. One of the criticisms that we got from farmers actually is that they wish they could just sign up with somebody at corporate and then we would force all the chefs to buy from them, that it would be easy for them in that sense. But I think that chef farmer relationship is so critical that I want the farmer to have to talk to the chef and talk about their product and talk about flavor, and the chef to be able to say, well, here's how I'm going to use it. We had a supplier out of Oregon, Omega Pears, that would have daily conversations with the chefs about how they were going to use the pears and then harvest accordingly. Different if you're going to use the pear as hand fruit versus if you're going to poach the pear. And it again gets back to that flavor piece of really having a material difference on the quality of the product. You need to have that relationship.
It's kind of amazing, Maisie, that you can do that at scale. You're $1.5 billion corporation. That sounds like a tremendous amount of hands-on local touch. Is that you've been able to scale it?
Yeah, it requires a lot of training and a lot of trust. So I would say that my team at the corporate office was about educating and inspiring the chefs to make the right decision every day, but we didn't make the decision for them. There was a fair amount of decentralization that creates the opportunity for amazing things to happen. And the chefs would surpass my expectations on a daily basis. Sometimes fall short, and then you have to correct. You have to have measurement systems to catch those stumbles and be able to coach through. But a lot of trust and responsibility given to the people making the frontline buying decision.
Yeah, and that's another piece that we talk about in business a lot. Can you make a difference from middle management, let's call it, the middle of the corporation, the operational part of the corporation? Can people get meaning and fulfillment and creativity in those jobs? And it certainly sounds like you've done that at Bon Appetit. Your people sound like they're excited and inspired, and you harness that.
Absolutely. And that's one of the incredible side benefits of building a brand based on sustainability. It becomes a recruiting and retention tool. People want to work for a company where they feel they are doing good in the world, where they can bring their values to work. And so it attracts a certain type of employee that has passion and fervor for these issues, and they stay longer because of it.
Yeah. So let me pick up on a couple of words that you've just used. One is measurement, and that's one of the big challenges in an area like yours where the targets aren't always quantitative. It's hard to put numbers on what you do, but you've got to make progress. You've got to understand you're getting better. So tell us about how you measure internally. I was particularly impressed by the red, yellow, green tracker in your book. Thanks for sharing that with us. But tell us about measurement in general, maybe about that tool as an example.
So the red, yellow, green tracker is what we called our circle of responsibility matrix. Circle of responsibility was the brand name we gave our sustainability programs. And we had a green section, which was commitments that we had made publicly. Yellow, which are things that we're actively working on. And red are things that we would like to take a stand on, but we can't figure out how. We're stalled for some reason. And we would have regular meetings with myself and our director of culinary support and development and our CEO to go through all three stages. You'd think that when you have something in the green, that it's a public commitment, that your work is done. But it turns out that things fall out of the green. Supply chains change. You have a global pandemic. Things in the green need regular tending as well. Things in the yellow, you're really active on. So it's intuitive that you would want a large yellow list of things that you're about to make a commitment on. But it's kind of counterintuitive to say you actually want a large red list. Those are the things that you're stuck on. If you're not stuck on things, then it indicates two things to me. One, that you're not thinking creatively enough. And two, that people are going to usurp your leadership position, other companies. You need to be working on the really tough issues if you want to have a leadership position. If you only do things that have already been figured out by others, you may be equal to your competitors, but you will never create differentiation with it. So it's a very active matrix for us.
How do you measure that? Are you looking to move the yellows into the greens? You're looking to do better on some metric in green? You're looking to get out of red? What's the metric?
You're looking to increase all of them. You want to move the yellows to the greens and the reds to the yellows, and then backfill with more reds. You want to have your ears open. I would say go to conferences, not necessarily in your industry, but in adjacent industries, like the conferences that your suppliers would go to. You want to get out and meet your suppliers in the field. In my case, it was literally the field. If you're not in food, it might be a factory or a mine, something like that. Look for ideas. Just always have your eyes and ears open. Talk to people. Ask people who are way more extreme than you are, what would you like us to do? And then that fills up your red list.
Yeah. Interesting. Fascinating. So that's a board level or a C-suite level tool? It's right at the top of the organization, or is it for everybody?
It was for us at director level and above, but certainly not a secret. Anybody was welcome to see it.
Yeah.
Anybody internally. You don't want your competitors to see it. It's where your secret sauce is.
Right. Yeah. Although we might be able to reverse engineer it from what you've told us. Yeah. Another word you just used now is passion. And one can certainly see where the passion comes in being able to do what you do in the sustainability world. But you qualified that from the business perspective as passion with leverage. Right? There's no point in having passion if you got no leverage to implement it. Your leverage, at least one of them, is your procurement budget. You can deploy it or not as you see fit, which is great. But tell us about that in principle for people with kind of sustainability or improving the world intentions. You've got to have leverage. Tell us about that.
You've got to figure out where in the supply chain you sit and where you can make change. Now, I keep referring back to supply chain because I'm in a very heavy purchasing business. There's other places you have leverage. You have leverage as an employer, for example. You can make different hiring decisions, different benefits decisions. You've got leverage there. So figure out what is in your span of control. You mentioned middle managers. Middle managers have leverage too. Think about what you control, what decisions you make, and how you can make those more sustainable.
Yeah, one of the inspiring things in your book is that you believe people, which can be individuals, could be teams, could be firms, could be collaborations between farmers and suppliers and networks and so on like that, they can make a difference. And that I think is your passion plus leverage message. I love that, the feeling that you can make a difference.
I think we all want that. You asked about where I came from, how I got to this place. I have two parents that were both in the social services, really trying to, in mental health, support their communities through a parenting center and through being a low-cost provider for psychology services. And I wanted nothing to do with that. I didn't want to listen to problems all day. I wanted to make money. So my rebellion was to go into business. But it turns out that those values were instilled in me. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Being able to blend helping my community with making money has become my passion.
Yeah, and it's a passion for you, but you've been able to inspire a lot of other people too, right? You've helped a lot of people feel that way.
When we started talking about sustainability publicly, or when we started talking about sustainability publicly, I said to the small group that was making that decision, in the food world, up until that point, every chef that was doing anything related to sustainability had one of two stories. They'd been going along cooking as they had learned in culinary school, the mother sauces, classic French technique. And then either they ate at Chez Panisse, Alice Waters' hallowed restaurant in Berkeley, or if they were on the East Coast, they got the Moosewood Cookbook, which was a very seminal vegetarian cookbook in the 70s. And those two experiences, one of those two, had changed the way that they thought about food. And I said, we can be more impactful than either Chez Panisse or Moosewood. And that was like heresy to put us as a cafeteria company into the same breath as these two landmark restaurants. But the thing that we had that they didn't was a different level of leverage. We served 250 million meals a year, and we had over 20,000 employees. So I touched way more people than even something as famous as Chez Panisse or Moosewood could. I was able to maybe make incremental change compared to them going farther and faster, but on a larger scale. And that is something that I'm very proud of, and that it creates a legacy of many, many evangelists.
No, you should be very proud of it. It's making a difference at scale and with continuous improvement. I'm going to pluck one more element from your book from a business standpoint, Maisie, and that's what we call adaptability. You say, don't be inflexible. The world is continually changing. It's not appropriate to be rigid. And sometimes, I'm not an expert in the sustainability field. Sometimes it feels like it's a little bit of an ideology. It's trying to make us feel like we're bad people because we're not acting sustainably enough. And you don't think that way, obviously, but how do you adapt? How are things changing? Is science changing? Is it social mores changing? Is it culture changing? What's changing?
All of the above. So we like to think that science is absolute and static, that once something is scientifically true, that's it. But it turns out that science is more flexible than that. As more information comes, things change. There's also a practicality that I think you have to adapt to. For example, we at Bon Appetit only serve wild salmon. Is on the Seafood Watch from the Monterey Bay Aquarium's green list. We have a commitment to wild salmon. However, we were presented with a project in farmed salmon where they were looking at the workers' rights in the salmon farms. And then I've got this dilemma of, do I care more about the fish or do I care about the people? Of course, I care about both, right? We're a large enough company that I'm able to split our purchases and say we're going to keep some in this wild salmon, but we also want to be involved in this human rights project around farm salmon. Now, that project is still just an idea. It hasn't come to fruition, but I'm going to put some resources into supporting it, learning more, and hope it goes somewhere, yet be flexible enough to also pull back if it doesn't. Again, as I said, if you want to take a leadership position, you're going to have to take some risks and be out ahead of what's already been figured out, what the path is that's clear. You need to work without a net a little bit and be flexible in accepting challenges, failure, and changing course.
Well, getting beyond the safety net a little bit, one of the things that strikes me that you and your community in sustainable food have helped us understand is the relationship between food and diet and personal health. And one of the things that shocks me a lot is the medical profession doesn't know a lot about that. They don't help people as much as they should about that aspect of their health. And that can create a hospitable environment for disease when people could be doing much better. Do you ever wander into that space, the relationship between food and health, or is that beyond your remit?
We do. And the fantastic thing is that it turns out what's most healthy for our bodies, in most cases, is also what's most healthy for the planet. In fact, there was a landmark report called the Eat Lancet report that looked at science from around the world and is rather undisputed, that talks about eating whole foods in a low in meat diet is better for personal and planetary health. So we do tie those two things together often, whether that's great luck or divine design. It turns out that sustainability and wellness are intertwined.
Yeah, and I think that's an important part of our next generation of progress is thinking about that, about the intertwining of those two things. Well, Maisie, you may accuse me of being poetic and vague, but I think you're making the world a better place, and I admire you for that. Thank you for all that you do from everybody. When is your book published?
The book comes out April 2nd, available at Amazon or bookstore.com to get to your independent bookseller. And having taken the time to write it, my hope is really that it's useful to people. So thank you for giving me this platform to talk about it and share some of the information.
Well, the book's called You Can't Market Manure at Lunchtime. We'll do our best to make people aware of it. Where else should people go if they want to find out more about Maisie and about your company?
Can go to MaisieGanzler.com. It's MaisieGanzler.com.
Beautiful. Well, once again, thank you for all you do. Thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to reading about the success of your book.
Thank you.
This has been another episode of the Value Creators Podcast. Thanks for listening. You can visit thevaluecreators.com for links and resources related to this episode, and check out hunterhastings.com for more content on entrepreneurial business management based on value creation principles.